Welcome in to the Game Plan Live podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com. It's the Game Plan. It's Duke Week. Johnny T-Shirt sponsored us. Greg, what they used to do on Franklin Street back in the day? Used to have a parade, a Beat Duke parade down
That's a
Franklin
great
Street.
story, right?
That is a great story. If folks haven't read that, it's on Inside Carolina Now. Let me find it here as we talk about it. But just a cool tradition back in the day that they do. They need to get that back going. But quite frankly, the Carolina Duke game doesn't carry as much weight, I guess, with the new crowd. The old heads generally love the Duke matchup. Jason Staples is going to join us here. He's had some issues getting in, so I'm going to bring him in right now. Let's see if I can do this right and not screw it up. There's the third. There's that. There's Jason. Slide me down. Here we are.
What a pro.
And you got a hot mic. You just blew out my left eardrum.
Yeah, well, it's not the first time I've been told something about the setup is hot. Yeah.
Turn it down just a little bit if you can, seriously, because it is.
Well, there's nothing I can do on my end. This is StreamYard having to, it started me off real hot, and the software automatically adjusts. So it's the same. It's the same level that it always is. It just takes StreamYard a little bit.
Okay, well, maybe they'll fix it, because right now you're hot. Barnes, you got a haircut. I saw you this week.
I did. I told them to take off about an inch, and they took off about 2 inches. So my head feels light.
So, Greg Barnes, we're working on and discussing a cool little thing we'll discuss later in this podcast, a new feature at Inside Carolina that we'll bring to you starting next week, maybe Wednesday. But let's get right into this, Greg. We were talking about the tradition of the Duke-Carolina rivalry. If you talk to any of the old people, Duke Carolina was always it. It's not the case anymore, but the way this season is shaped up, it is a huge football game for both programs, but really for North Carolina on Saturday.
Yeah, this is about stacking wins, right? We know how important that win last weekend down in Miami Gardens was. That was really the opportunity for North Carolina to take a step forward. Both on defense, which they did, as well as in the Coastal, and really kind of assert control. And they've done that. They're top the Coastal. ESPN's FPI, I think, has them at like a 67% chance of winning, 68% chance of winning the Coastal. And so Carolina just has to be able to stack a good win on top of another win. And they've started division play as well as they could have hoped for, with a dominant win against Virginia Tech, a road win against the preseason favorite in Miami. Duke is playing well under first-year head coach Mike Elko. They're well coached. They don't have a lot of talent. And so that's something that North Carolina can exploit, and we can get into that a little bit. But if Carolina is able to take care of business against the Blue Devils at Wallace Wade on Saturday night, they're going to go into that bye week feeling really good. And then they've got 3 really difficult games to close out the year. And then, of course, you got to throw Georgia Tech in there as well, who's playing pretty solid since Jeff Collins was let go. But got to take care of business Saturday night first against a quality opponent. And as you said, for a long time, this rivalry didn't mean anything. And when David Cutcliffe arrived, that changed. Now that Mac Brown is back in Chapel Hill, he's kind of reasserted control of this rivalry, and he's going to be looking to go 12-2 against the Blue Devils as a North Carolina head coach.
Yeah, I asked him about at Wednesday's press conference. I asked him about it, and Jason, I want to get your take on this. How do you get players to understand the intensity of it, especially when it's been pretty one-sided? How do you do that as a coach? Mac, of course, has eight former guys on staff in some form or another, so they hear it all week. But as a player, going into a rivalry game where it's been one-sided, I mean, is it difficult to get ready?
It shouldn't be.
Ooh, that's hot.
I'll change it from the auto setting, but hang on.
It's like really hot. Live television.
How about now?
It's still distorted. I don't know. It doesn't. It's not your usual dulcet tones. We'll
Let,
just have to.
let me do something real quick. Hold on.
All right. How long we got to wait? Because if we got to wait for a minute, I'm on.
It's going to be just a moment.
All right, Greg. Let's tease. We'll get to that question, but for the folks in here, let's tease what we're trying to do next week. A little. Don't really want to call it a mailbag, but sort of a program that we're going to put out, me and you, on YouTube. Just sort of explain what you're thinking here.
Yeah, it's going to be a YouTube show, and it's going to be a condensed time frame. It's probably going to be half an hour, at least to start. We may have some extended sessions depending on who we get to join as guests. But the idea is, where we have these podcasts that people love, and we really can be long-winded, and we can branch off and just random topics that sometimes goes for an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on the topic. This is going to be much more defined. And the idea is for it to be not a TV show, because this is not TV, but similar in that we're going to have questions beforehand. We're going to be able to look into them, get some feedback, get some stats brought up, some details from various people, and make it a very sharp, pinpointed type show, a little bit different than what we've ever done at IC. We're going to use YouTube for that vehicle. So it should be fun. We'll get some outside voices to come in. If there's some big games coming up, or we need to talk about North Carolina's situation on the national level or on the ACC level as it pertains to other teams and Carolina's competition, we'll dive into that as well. So it should be a nice change of pace for what I see multimedia fans and subscribers are used to, and it should be a fun thing, Tommy.
Yeah, and one thing it does is allows Greg Barnes to expound on his many knowledgeable efforts. And a lot of times we shoot the breeze here and all, but it should be a fun time to dig a little deeper into questions that our readers and our subscribers and all that listen to or look for. We get a ton of questions on these podcasts, and some of them just are a little bit bigger than the podcasts themselves. So everybody listening, and right now there's a couple hundred of you in here, send us questions. You can tweet them to me. You can email them to me, Tommy@InsideCarolina.com. We'll have a thread on the message boards, all good stuff to be able to get some deeper dive questions. And like Greg said, we'll get people from outside of Inside Carolina to come on and join us and dig into those things. We've had outside guests before. Some have hit, some have not. But this should be a fun time to get some different takes on North Carolina, outside of the fishbowl that is Inside Carolina and the fishbowl and vacuum that maybe are the message board. So it should be fun. That'll start up next week. We're recorded, I believe, on Wednesday. Perfect time for a bye week. They cancel. They have a bye week, so Greg and I can get this rolling free of any other issues. So props to North Carolina for doing that for us.
We've been planning this since January when the schedule came out. So 10 months in the making.
Exactly. So perfect week. And we will get into it. And so, yes, all you regulars are on here, the iron watchers, iron listeners. Get your questions to me. We'll get them taken care of. Jason, Mr. Doctor, are we less hot?
We should be.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That is money there.
Yeah.
The question I asked was, how does Mac get his players, especially the young guys, to understand the intensity of rivalry games?
Yeah, you shouldn't have to do a whole lot. Now, sometimes when you're playing against a rival, like let's say Duke had lost all their games up to now, you might have to persuade your guys that even though it is a rivalry game and it just means more, that this is not a walkover. When you've got a rival that's actually won a number of games and against a couple, at least brand-ish names, that's much, much easier. And then when you turn on the tape and you see their quarterback, you go, okay, yeah, we're going to have to play. So I don't think it should be that difficult.
Riley Leonard, Greg. Why does he instill fear in North Carolina? Somebody asked. Carolina's in trouble if. I think if Riley Leonard looks like Daniel Jones. Let's go there early.
Yeah, I think that's a tall ask for Riley Leonard to do what Daniel Jones did back in 2016, right? And that was more of North Carolina self-sabotage than anything. That was a rough night. Carolina was rolling, and then you had a sub out at running back and a couple of plays that went sideways instead of up and down, and it just went off the rails. So that's that's not one that we want to spend too much time on. But look, Riley Leonard's he's been productive. He's been pretty solid. Kevin Johns, offensive coordinator at Duke, he's really in that Kevin Wilson coaching tree, if you will. A lot of similar formations and stuff to kind of what Phil Longo does. This is kind of the spread offense, 11 personnel, a lot of split zones. He's going to use motion, try to throw you off. And so Riley Leonard, because he's not like crazy fast. Probably similar to Daniel Jones in terms of his running ability, but they're not going to rely on him to do an awful lot of running. He's not Jeff Sims, for example, but he's been okay throwing the ball. I think the interesting thing about Riley Leonard, since we're already talking about him, Tommy, is Georgia Tech figured out that, hey, if you're able to get some pressure on him, he's going to struggle. If you look at what Georgia Tech was able to do last week, they blitzed him on 25 of 49 dropbacks. So 51% of the time he was blitzed. And when he was blitzed, he was, 9 of 19 passing for 83 yards. And so that speaks to some of the issues that Duke has offensive line-wise. I know they got one of their key guys is going to be out for Saturday's game. But also speaks to the fact that, hey, this is a young guy, and if you can get him under pressure a little bit, that can throw off this offense's rhythm. And I think that's something we'll have to watch, because Gene Chizik, we know early in the year wasn't doing much blitzing at all. And then the last couple of weeks, he's really kind of ramped that up. And so if that holds, then I think what Georgia Tech did last week will give North Carolina a lot of faith that they can control Riley Leonard and at least force him into some bad plays, some negative plays. And that's how you contain him, and that's how you really make him so he doesn't scare you, if that was the question.
Yeah, and you can see I'm still getting the hang of this producing thing. I need John Bowman here. So, Jason, I'll ask you the question. I'll throw it up on the screen. Walter Holt asks, how aggressive is Chizik with those blitzes, knowing Riley Leonard can run? Do you change things there?
I think he's going to do basically what he's been doing, which is, against a running quarterback like that, you'll see a lot of cover 7 in particular, a quarters look where you're going to get some safeties involved. You're going to allow those corners to kind of try to take away the deep shots to the outside and then turn your front loose. I think that's what they're going to do. They might, if they get burned a few times, they might designate someone to spy here or there, to mush rush on the front to try to wrap him up and keep him in. But other than that, I think you basically do what you're doing. And, they're not blitzing a ton. They're blitzing a decent amount. They didn't change how much they blitzed against Miami. People were complaining about not blitzing enough like 3 weeks ago, and they were blitzing the same amount 3 weeks ago that they did against Miami. It's just some of them got home against Miami that didn't against a better team like Notre Dame. Right. Some stuff just, it works better when you play, a team like Miami. So, I think against Duke, they'll basically bring a lot of the same sorts of things that they have the last few weeks. And, as long as you're sound in your approach, when you're rushing the passer or when you blitz, those lanes that the quarterback might try to get up into aren't going to be accessible, because again, even when you blitz, you're trying to maintain good gap integrity, your rush lanes and all of that. And as long as you're disciplined there, then you should be fine. They've not been selling out to get to the quarterback as it is. They've been judiciously blitzing when they think it's going to get them pressure in a certain situation. And I think that'll be the same approach.
Yeah, it's amazing what a couple sacks will do off a blitz. And people say, oh, they're blitzing more. But to your point, yeah, they got home a lot more against Miami and made some differences. I'll give shout out to Dean 59 Duke 35 as well. He asked a very similar question to that, so I want to give shout out to the board and to the questions. Let's see. Nick Whitfield, let's go into here. I'm just going straight questions, man. We'll talk all day, and we can do the game plan with questions. So Nick Whitfield asks, and Jason, I'll come back to you on this, and then Greg, you can get in here on your breakdown of the cornerback blitz that confused Miami. Do you expect to see those similar blitzes against Duke? I know you said they'll do pretty much the same thing they've been doing. Will they do anything special in that regard, seeing how they worked? Or is it just same old, like you said?
They'll try. I mean, that's the thing. Anytime you bring a pressure package for the week, you try to have it so that it's going to cause some confusion for the offensive line. I mean, that's what you try to do every week. The thing is, sometimes, like against Notre Dame, for example, you have a better offensive line. You have a better coached team. You've got a team that's been in the same offensive system for some years, and all of a sudden, those guys are picking it up. They're identifying it faster, and they're picking that up. And even though you disguise it well and all of that, and then, the next thing that you see is fans going, well, why aren't they, confusing them more? Well, because those guys identified it. They did a great job. They get paid, and they're on scholarship too. And some of them get paid quite a lot. So, that's the thing. So it depends a little bit. They'll try to do it. They'll try, when they bring pressure, they will try to sugar here and, bring pressure from over there. They'll try to, switch up which gap this guy is rushing in based on the prior week, or, just different things to cause a little bit of confusion for the offensive line. But again, that you can't determine, like you don't have the option to just choose like, okay, offensive line is going to be confused on this one. That's kind of up to their preparation and how ready they are. Now, the thing that will help is you're playing against an offense in the first year under a new head coach and a new offensive system, which usually means you're more prone to more mistakes. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see it work a little bit more this week, just like you did last week against another team that's in a first year under a new system and so on.
Tommy, I'm going to jump in and add a little bit to this and flesh it out and get Jason's opinion on something I think's relevant and kind of speaks to this a little bit, kind of on a grander scale, if you will. We've talked a lot on this podcast over the last decade or so about how offensive football has evolved, right? And Larry Fedora talked about this a lot. Phil Longo's talked about this a lot. But because your goal offensively these days with spread offenses is precision, and you want to be perfect in everything that you do. We talked a lot about Longo only has 28 concepts, right? And he mixes and matches those because he wants his guys to be great at a very limited amount. It's not like John Shute where you've got this massive notebook of NFL plays, right? And so what these guys do is you have a handful of plays for each situation. For example, Larry Fedora used to go back after every year, and he would count the number of third and shorts, the number of third and mediums, the number of third and longs that he would have per week. And so during a game week, he'd say, okay, guys, we're only going to have on average 4 third and longs. So we don't need 10 third and long plays. We need 4 or 5. And you do that with third and 3. You do that with third and medium. You do that with second long, second short, all that. So you have a very finite number of plays that you're going to call in certain situations. Why is that relevant? Well, Mike Elko really came up under Dave Clawson, excelled at Wake Forest. I guess he came with him even before that, maybe when he was at Bowling Green. And then, of course, he went to Notre Dame and then Texas A&M. Well, he's done a lot of the same stuff in that he knows that there's going to be certain third and short, certain third and medium, certain third and longs, and he wants the ability to call just a handful of plays, but to mix and match and those types of things depending on what the offense is showing. So he actually has pressure selections is what he says. They're hot, warm, and cold. So, of course, hot is he's going to send 6 guys. That's the max. Warm is going to be where it's a situation you're only probably going to send 5, so you might have a fire zone in there. And then, of course, you have cold, which is really you're really doing just simulator pressure. A lot of what Jay Bateman did. Bold strategy, Cotton, right? And that's where you're going to probably drop 7 or 8. And so, depending on what an offense shows, he's going to signal out to his guys, all right, guys, you know the structure of what we're wanting to do here, but because of how they're lining up, we're going hot. Or hang on, I don't like how that's set up. We're going cold. And he'll trigger plays in like that. So it's a very unique approach. And so what I was going to ask Jason is when you're talking about some of these cornerback blitzes and some of these unique looks, how much are defensive coaches taking that similar approach to Elko, where you're not just running completely base stuff, you're having stuff on the field where, of course, you're going to have checks depending on where guys line up and personnel packages and those types of things. But just to have a trigger of, okay, we're going to see what they're going to do. We're set up in this base setup, and then I'm just going to say, all right, guys, we're going to go hot, we're going to go warm, we're going to go cold.
So I lost the question in there a little bit in the sense of like, how are they bringing this to Elko?
Well, Elko is doing this in terms of having very unique approaches with not just checks, but in telling the guys, hey, we're going to blitz for sure, or hang on, we're not going to blitz, even though that's what we initially wanted to do.
That's pretty common. I mean, that's most.
Is that a new thing?
It's not entirely new. I mean, teams were doing it a decade ago. But I think you see more defenses incorporating that now than you used to. And
well, let me phrase it like this. Since the spread offenses have changed everything in terms of how they operate, is this how defenses are trying to counter?
Yes, and that's why you're seeing it more. I mean, teams did it before, but the real difference is that what happened more frequently is that teams now so often come to the line of scrimmage, and you saw this with Fedora when he first got to Carolina. One of the biggest differences is that they would race to the line of scrimmage, and they'd line up and go through a cadence, and then look to the sideline, right? And almost everybody does some version of that now, where you have these check with me's, or what we used to call a freeze box. I mean, we did it when I was at Florida State, where you go no huddle, you run the freeze, and then that forces the defense to show what they're doing, and then the offense calls whatever play they want based on what the box sees. Okay, they're in this coverage, they're bringing pressure from here, call this check, run it. And now, if you don't, as a defense, have something else in your back pocket, then you're leaving the offense with the chalk. And whoever holds the chalk last is going to have the advantage. So, 10, 15 years ago, teams were already doing some of this, like they'd see the offense audible and then the defense would check. So it was a matter of like a race to see who could be the last one holding the chalk at the chalkboard. And now this is one of the reasons why, by the way, you see now, 10 years ago, this was the heyday of like Chip Kelly in Oregon. And the big thing was run fast, everybody going really, really fast. Fedora coming in, how many, we're going to try to run 85 plays a game sort of thing, right? How many teams are doing that now?
Now it's a tempo game, right? A very tempo.
Almost no one does warp speed all the time because it's suicide. Defenses get their calls in faster now. That was one of the things with Bateman, actually, that was an advantage of his system, is that there were fewer words involved in his calls. So, one word would communicate something to all 3 levels, this sort of thing. It's simplified in that respect. And there's a lot of defenses that have applied some of those simplified approaches where you have something that's built in that basically the call gets in, and then going fast is not as big of an advantage. Partly you have defenses where, okay, look, if we don't get a call in, we're in cover 7, jet up front, cover 7, this sort of thing. And so they know what they're doing if there's no call. And you know what the built-in checks are to different formations and everything, and you just rep the heck out of that in practice, so you're ready for tempo. And so what teams have had to do then is now the advantage of catching the defense with their pants down is almost entirely eliminated, unless you just do it once in a while, where all of a sudden you speed up really quickly, you go warp for 1 or 2 plays when you think you've got their pants down, and then you do it. But other than that, defenses have that. So now what offenses are doing is they're getting to the line of scrimmage, and you're seeing these no huddle teams snapping the football with like 4 and 5 seconds on the clock, because they get up there, they run their cadence, look to the sideline, get a play, and that play will be a dummy. And they'll do it again. And then the defense will show its second play. And then the offense will be like, all right, well, based on film, when they would then in that play, and somebody's done this check out of this, okay, then this is what they did for their next check. And you've got the film on like when they showed this and then they checked out of it on film 45% of the time. They checked into this. So now we're going to run something that is going against what we think they're going to check into. And the defense knows that you're going to do that. So now they've got something else that they're going to try to check into for that. Or sometimes they'll stay with the thing that they showed, knowing that you're going to change.
All right, boys, y'all about to lose me now.
So this is the Princess Bride, right? I know that you know that I know that I can't drink the one in front of me. But I'm not a great fool. So, this is what is going on at the line of scrimmage is, it's basically trying to be the last one holding the chalk at the chalkboard to make sure that I'm not putting any of my players at a matchup disadvantage. So one of the strategies is you make a call, and that call comes packaged with a secondary call of, if they check based on you showing this, then you auto check to this. It's just the way most defenses are doing stuff now.
Y'all getting into the weeds, and I'm sitting there fighting porn bots in the YouTube chat. I mean, what the heck is happening here on a Thursday night? And it's telling me I can't do it anymore. So I'm trying to get rid of them, folks. Greg, did you get the answer you were seeking? Because for somebody that did not understand the question, he certainly
got it. Yeah, I didn't phrase the question very well, but the point really is, when Chiswick's calling a corner blitz, like Jason breaks down, like, is that the play going in, or is that something that kind of last second on one of their checks to say, look, let's throw this blitz in there. I think that's kind of what people are interested in, is we hear so much about Gene really dumbing things down and going base. And you can't just play strict base. You got to have some wrinkles in there. But how much is that type of play, maybe one of these checks that they're able to capitalize on? Or is that just, hey, we're going to do that based on this particular look and see if we can make it work?
Jason, let me ask you a random question off of this topic. How much of the signals, the hand signals, all that stuff is just simply eye candy?
It's some of it is. So it depends, and again, this depends on the system. And so with Phil Longo, with those hand signals, he has, I can't remember what the number he said, but he's got something like 120 dummy signals that he puts in there with the real signal. So one of the signals that he's doing is actually the play. And everything else is a dummy signal, and the players know which one is the real play when it comes packaged in the right way.
It's like a third base coach.
Basically. So he's basically taking that approach. Then you have the teams with the boards, right? And all sorts of things, and defenses that do this as well. And there's signals for that. And one way that teams do the boards is like the color in the upper left-hand corner tells you whether the board is live or whether the signal is live. And if the color is this, then the board is live, and then these couple pictures mean this. And if the pictures are shuffled, it means that. And if the board is dead, but the signal's live, then the signal is what the players look to for something else. But either way, the signal's going to go and the board's going to go, and you have to know which one is on, which one is live to know which one to steal.
And if we're paying
all sorts of ways to do this.
Yeah, if a school is paying a 22-year-old $25,000 a year to come up with these signals and to write on these boards and to color, like literally to color and print out graphics and stick them on a poster board, put
Oh, you broke up on the.
radio
We lost Greg. Greg, you gone cyborg.
and helmets like the
I heard helmets. I heard put microphones. I'm gonna mute him, Jason. Will you finish his question?
so we can get.
I can't finish that question. I wanted to know where he was going. Oh, there he is. I
Hey,
think
you're
he's back.
Greg, you totally. I think I muted you.
Greg, you're alive.
You totally went Godzilla movie on us, man. I think he's gone.
Oh,
He's
he
frozen.
gone.
The bottom line is, I think what he was saying, Jason, just
This
put
live show is
microphones.
great.
I know.
Am I
really.
here? Am I back?
Oh, it sounds like it.
I don't know. Did the porn bot get you, Greg?
Oh my gosh.
I don't know what happened. Somebody, I can't pronounce the name, but 117 at the end said, "Can we repurpose the porn bots to figure out what the defensive check should be?" Greg, you might need to go and come back, and I'll figure out how to do the graphics. But the bottom line is, Jason, would that stop all of this stuff if they had mics? Like Mac has talked about that a lot. Just put speakers or microphones in the middle linebacker and the quarterback's helmet. Does that change? Does that get rid of all this stuff?
It changed some of it, but not all of it. Because I mean, the thing is, the quarterback still has to get the play to the rest of the team. So if, for example, you're running a no huddle, which is what everybody does right now, now you have the quarterback who has the play in his helmet, and he's now got to signal it to the other 10 guys.
We need to go back to huddles, man.
It just changes where the signal is stolen at that point. So what you would see with the helmet thing, and I think this is something that Mac would probably prefer, with the helmet thing, I guarantee you'd see a lot more teams huddle.
Yeah. Nobody huddles anymore. I kind of like huddles. I mean, it's like, where did they go? I'm an old school guy, though. Somebody's in here in the chat saying they were in class with LT back in the day. That is somebody that's older than I am, so it's good to see. Let's well, as we wait for Greg to come back in, you listen. Well, let me do this. Johnny T-shirt and JohnnyT-shirt.com, sponsors of this podcast, great friends of Inside Carolina. Go by there and get your Beak Dupe pins and everything Beak Dupe related. Check out the article I posted in the YouTube chat. Matt Morgan's Beak Dupe Parade, Rivalry on Parade. This is a long form article on Inside Carolina. And get down to Johnny T-shirt and support them. Get your gear and then head over to Wallace Wade Stadium. They're friends of the Inside Carolina podcast. They're friends of the Inside Carolina website and the community. 10% off your everyday order. If you subscribe and are a premium member, it will pay for itself if you get that Johnny with that Johnny T-shirt discount. Somebody said Duke fans are sabotaging on the beat, or excuse me, the Game Plan Live. I really believe they are. We'll let the national guys pay the bills. We'll be right back. Game Plan. Jason Staples. I'm Tommy Ashley, and Greg Barnes is somewhere in the ether. We'll hope to get him back after the break. All right, man, I've lost
These
it.
comments are killing me, man.
I know, and I'm trying not to get tickled, and you folks are making it difficult. It's going to be – I will give some people a heads up since Joey Powell had to come pop up in the chat. Make sure you check out Inside Carolina Live on Saturday before the Duke game, because we're going to have Dan Orner, talk to him, ask him to come on Inside Carolina Live. He's got a few stories to tell, one of which happened in Wallace Wade Stadium. And cause a little damage over there. Anyway, Jason Staples, I'm going to ask you a couple questions on here as we try to wait for Greg to get back. Austin Sargent asks, with the struggles on first down runs, are those struggles from not getting to the second level or getting double team split by down linemen since we're gap scheme heavy? We've talked about this a little bit, and we've talked about how it's not on the offensive line totally. But last week specifically, what did you see that maybe changed any opinion you had up until last week on the run game, Carolina run game?
I think last week confirmed a lot of what we'd been saying, which was if the backs start to identify and, hit the proper spaces, the proper spots in rhythm, then you'd get more consistency in the running game. And, Caleb Hood in the first half, especially, really did that. And Miami was a good run. Look, I throw shade on Miami at every opportunity. You know this. Miami's run defense is legit. They'd stopped basically everybody in the running game all season. And Carolina went in there and ran the football on them. And it was because Caleb Hood got into rhythm and was hitting the gaps on time when it was there, when it was available. So I think more than anything, the running game issues have been on the running backs more than on the offensive line. Now, yeah, they could get to the second level better. That is a factor. And if you listen to Mike Ingersoll, he's going to emphasize that factor. And I think rightly so. But to my eye, the biggest problem has been running backs. I mean, there's a number of plays that, I could break down where, and I don't want to pile on to guys. I mean, that's the thing, especially young guys who are still really learning. I'm much more likely to pile onto a third or fourth year player who should have known by now. But, there are cases where you're seeing, okay, this is a run where when the back gets the ball, if his feet are in line with his eyes and he's got his head up, there's a B gap opening here. And if he hits it on time, there's, 5-6 yards there. It's not perfect blocking, but there's a B gap open. And he runs with his head down straight into the A gap, right up the back of somebody or right into a linebacker. And you go, well, what's the problem? What's the offensive line not doing? Well, this is a unit thing. You have to have your offensive line do it well, and you have to have the backs hitting those gaps in rhythm. And as I said before, I think this is where not having British Brooks this year has really affected them, because I think that's something that he really figured out later.
Greg, when you went out into you beamed up somewhere, I assume you were saying get microphones in the helmet. So we talked about that a little bit.
I got so frustrated I banged on my computer and it just went black. So I had to start a new computer up.
So this comes from our generation of like, if there's a problem with it, you got to pull the cartridge out and bang it on something and blow on it, and it's fine. And then you pop it back in, right?
Yep.
That unfortunately doesn't work real well with most modern technology.
No, I'm quickly becoming the old guy with this technology stuff.
I know, really.
But
it
one thing I did comment that I think you'd appreciate on this, Greg, is that the biggest change if you put the helmets on, if you put the mics in the helmets, is you'd see a whole lot more teams huddle.
True.
And Jason also said it just would change where they're stealing it from. So
if you're in no huddle, you're just stealing signals from the quarterback now.
Great, really great. Yeah, you can just steal it from one guy and not 20 over there with a bunch of signs and stuff. Greg, the question was asked about the running game and Carolina's struggle. I mean, you covered this team extensively forever, but specifically for my question's purposes, when Javonte and Michael Carter were freshmen and young guys, through to when they were not, and they were legit running backs. It didn't happen overnight. They didn't come in doing everything Jason just talked about, hitting the holes on rhythm, being in the right spot at the exact right time. I mean, I think folks sort of have gotten where they expect that. And when they see that, they expect it all the time. Your take there on the growth that this running back room has shown thus far in this season. Omarion still keeps his head down. Mac talked about it. Somebody asked, will it get better when he gets his head up? Yes. But vision is not just it's not just everybody has the same vision. All you got to do is look. It doesn't work that way, does it?
No, it certainly does not. I mean, and think about the fastest guy in the room, George Pettaway. And he's just not playing a whole lot. There's a lot that goes into it. DJ Jones is kind of the veteran now, but he's been banged up so much throughout his career. It's not like he's played a lot. And so your British Brooks, is he an NFL guy? No. But he's been around a long time. He understands what they want. He really popped end of last year, and they liked him even before then. But you don't have that luxury right now. And so while you do have a veteran offensive line, you still have some new pieces. I do think it's a problem they're having to rely on really just 5 guys as much as they are up front. They really need to do a better job kind of developing a 6th, 7th, 8th guy they can count on to kind of rotate in and out, especially looking ahead to next year. But at least that allows you to build some chemistry up front. And I think I agree with Jason. I think the offensive line has been pretty solid for the most part. But you got to give those young guys some opportunities. And we've seen, App State game's a good example. There's a couple runs there where the hole was available, and whether it's Caleb Hood or Hampton or whoever, they were able to take advantage. And you just need to be more consistent with that, and don't try to do too much. Take what's there in front of you, and that's easier said than done. You got to take the smart play, the easy play, and those are the ones that turn into big plays. And it's just a growth opportunity for these guys, and it's a learning curve.
Somebody asked, can you be taught? Mark Williams asked, can you be taught vision, or does it come naturally? I think you can be taught, but the good ones it's just natural.
It comes easier for them for sure.
Yeah, and all that stuff. So let's look at this. We're on Carolina's offense. We'll flip back to the defense before we get out of here.
Hang on one second. Let me say this too, Tommy, while we're on this topic with Hampton.
Okay.
Before Javonte Williams ever showed up, North Carolina's recruiting coordinator, on signing day, I sat down with him, and he said, nobody's talking about Williams. Pay attention to him. He's going to be really good. And part of that was because even in practice, he was laying hits that were getting oohs and ahs, even from the defensive side of the ball. That really didn't show up until his second year, and then he exploded. We've heard a lot about Hampton being able to lay these crushing hits in practice. You're really not seeing that often, though, in the games. He actually hasn't broken many tackles. And so as he gets more accustomed, and as he grows up and gets stronger and gets used to the speed of the game and gets used to the vision aspects that's required and how to level some of these guys when he's running, that's going to allow him to really transition from what he was in high school, what he's been in practice, to live game action. And that's just going to take time. I'm not saying he's going to be like Javonte, but he's a guy that's going to break a lot more tackles than he's doing right now. And that's just a matter of the young guy growing up.
Indeed. Offensive game plan. We do call this show the game plan. We got called out a couple weeks ago, rightfully so, that we weren't talking about the game plan enough. I've got some more questions in, and I will sort of get them in as we go. But Jason, Carolina's offensive approach to Duke, I'll freely admit, I hadn't watched them much. I know that if Georgia Tech beat them, then there's some issues on that Duke roster. People are asking about the talent levels. I think the talent level difference is pretty obvious. But what's Carolina need to do offensively to feel comfortable against Duke? You can't say Drake May just does Drake May things. That's too easy. I mean, you don't get paid the big bucks just to say Drake May, and more Drake May.
See, here's the thing.
That's really the answer, isn't it?
That's really the problem, is that coming into this game, they basically need to do what they do. And we've talked about this before. I mean, again, we've talked about this a lot. Phil Longo's not going to do a whole lot different in this game. Duke is not bringing Alabama's talent to the table here. So defensively, you know what Duke is mostly going to do. So Elko historically has been a heavy cover 7 guy. They're going to run a lot of match principles. They're going to have a lot of disguise after, before the snap, and they're going to do some different things, after the snap to provide confusion. I think the main thing that Carolina needs to do in this game to basically make sure that they move the football well and come out of this victorious on that side of the ball is the offensive line needs to do a good job of identifying stunts, identifying where blitzes are coming from. Quarterback can help them with that. But they've got to do a good job of basically communicating and passing stuff off up front so that you don't have missed assignments leading to free shots on the quarterback or in the backfield. If they just take care of business in terms of identifying what they're seeing, that's going to basically go a long way. At that point, you can let Carolina's talent on the outside do its thing. And you know, they're more talented on the outside than most of the teams they're going to play this year. And Duke is not an exception. And, you know, you've got Drake May making those throws to those guys. That's it. But I think the thing, if you're trying to identify, like, what is it that they need to do, you can simplify things by having some success in terms of some success and balance. They need to run the football well enough to keep Duke honest defensively, and just basically identify and pick up whatever packages, whatever pressure packages Elko is going to try to bring in to create turnovers. Because that's the thing. I mean, I think in this game, for Duke to win this game, they're going to have to create some turnovers, and they know it. And so what that means, if I'm Mike Elko, I'm coming in with a few extra packages. Maybe, you know, I've identified that, you know, the left tackle and the left guard haven't always passed off this stunt all that well. And, you know, maybe I can package that behind something so I can get, you know, package a player to where I know they like to run their hot on against out of this formation. And so I'm going to try to blitz out of this, or maybe get a stunt here and then have a guy in that zone just to try to create enough confusion to cause a problem. Carolina picks some of that stuff up and just takes care of business up front. I think it's basically business as usual on offense. And there's nothing special you have to do. You just have to basically identify what they're trying to do to cause those problems.
Greg, Carolina's offensive MVP. And then
And
it can't be not Drake. No, no. We're not using Drake May every week. We're not. Greg, give me somebody different. It's too easy. Carolina wins if somebody not named Drake May, who is blank, plays well, and you're muted at the moment.
I'll go Caleb Hood, just because he's been playing well the last couple of weeks. I think that's the guy that has been solid. He needs to continue to grow on that. I know he's got the injury concerns, but just kind of stock those on top of one another. Let me say this though about Duke. Jason's spot on there. I do want to get his take on why Elko has been successful defensively over the last decade or so. But if you happen to watch the Georgia Tech game, Georgia Tech's 2 touchdowns were on NFL throws and NFL catches. Those were not open touchdown passes. I mean, those were tightly covered, and those balls that Sims threw were on ropes. I mean, there was not a thing in either of those touchdown plays that the Duke defensive staff is upset about. Those were just plays, great plays.
Tip of your hat stuff.
Right, for sure. And I think if the concern for Duke coming out of that game is just the offense couldn't do anything. Duke doesn't make a ton of mistakes. They're very solid. You know, they do have a +7 turnover ratio. They've forced 10 turnovers, which is key. But where they've really had success, because the numbers are not very good in terms of advanced metrics, not nearly as bad as Carolina, of course, but where they've really shined, and this kind of reverts back to what we've talked so much about with Gene Chizik going back to 2015, they are 34th nationally in touchdown rate in terms of opponent drives that end in touchdowns. So they've done a very good job. While they do give up a lot of yards and a lot of big plays, they've been effective in keeping teams out of the end zone. And that's really the only reason that the defensive numbers are not worse than they are. And so I think for Carolina, they've done such a good job, especially in the red zone, of getting across the goal line, not having to settle. Duke just does not have enough firepower offensively to match Carolina. So if Carolina is able to be efficient scoring the ball and score touchdowns instead of field goals, I think this will be a pretty easy win for Carolina.
Ooh,
but Jason, why don't you answer that if you can? You know, Elko has some good defenses at Wake. Then, of course, he was good enough that Kelly liked him at Notre Dame, stayed there, I think, a year. And then Jimbo came calling. So what does he do that's maybe different from a lot of his peers?
I think he's a really good teacher. And he does a great job of getting his defenses to play with a lot of consistency and a lot of a lot of discipline within their system. So, and that's one of the reasons why I think he's actually a really good fit for Duke. Is, you know, he's a guy that at Wake Forest, without being able to recruit like Texas A&M or Notre Dame or, you know, one of those blue blood programs, they consistently produced really good defenses when he was there. I mean, it was like when he was there, Wake Forest was in many respects kind of the opposite of what they are now. They were a pain in the butt to play defensively, but offensively, they were okay. And then he left to go to Notre Dame, and they became much more offense heavy. And now, like, defensively, they're but offensively, they're terrifying. So, but, you know, he does a great job of putting his defensive back, of schooling his defensive backs so that they are they're disciplined in the way that they play their techniques. They disguise coverages typically very well. They communicate extremely well. Elko defenses have historically been really good on the communication front. And there's not a whole lot of free stuff generally on the back end because of that, even without top end athletes. Now, the thing is, if you can run by them, you can run by them. I mean, that's just defense. But generally speaking, they do a great job of communicating, taking away free space, of doing, you know, pattern matching is hard to teach and hard to get guys to do quickly without thinking. All modern defenses have to pattern match. And to explain what that is, in the old school sort of country drop zone defenses, you call a cover 3, and, you know, your strong safety is inverted down near the line of scrimmage, and at the snap he runs out to the flat, which is his responsibility, and the linebacker drops to the hash at a specific yardage, and that's, you know, he's got his sort of zone there, and the corners are deep thirds and they just take off there. And that's just what you have. You've got your area of grass that you're defending. 25, 30 years ago, some defensive coordinators figured out that, you know, the grass actually doesn't, like, if the grass catches the ball, that's actually good for you.
Why are we guarding grass?
Yeah, why are we defending grass? Like, that doesn't help. So what you started getting is pattern matching defenses where, and actually Belichick and Saban were on the cutting edge of this, where basically they started putting rules in for defenders on, it's basically a very rapid route or very rapid decision tree. If he does this, you do this. If he does this, then you do this. And so a good example of this is, let's say you have cover 7, which is a match cover, a quarters coverage. So, you know, there are four players that ultimately could be responsible for a deep zone, but it's a match coverage. So you're matching up with whoever comes into your zone in a particular way, and then you cover the man that's going to come through your zone. So it's like matchup zone in basketball. And if you're the corner in cover 7 and you've got twins to your side, you are watching the release of the receiver who's the furthest outside, but you're watching through him to the release of the receiver who's inside him as well. If both release vertically, you have the receiver on the outside. Whatever he does, he's yours. If your guy goes inside and then you see their guy starting to come outside, you switch. Now you've got the guy outside. If you see your guy going vertical and their guy coming out, well, you've got to take the vertical, right? But you're aware of where that out is. There's just different things that you do, and there's different checks involved. This takes a lot of really disciplined schooling to really play this well and to be able to do this quickly at a high level so that everybody's on the same page. And if everybody does it right, there's not much space, because as soon as a guy crosses over into another zone, it's just passed off. And now the next guy passes things off. It's just like a good switch in basketball. If you don't do it right, there's a lot of space. Now you got 2 guys on one guy, and one guy's out there running free.
You got J.J. Jones at Miami in first drive of the game for Carolina.
Bingo. That's an example of they had a match coverage on, and the corner and the safety were completely on different pages in terms of what they were supposed to be doing. And you don't see much of that from Elko. And then you combine that with he does a lot of things in terms of disguising blitzes and all of that, whereas when the ball is snapped, your pre-snap assessment of what he's doing defensively is not guaranteed to be right. Oftentimes he's shifting things after the snap. So it looks like cover 4 or cover 7 at the snap, and all of a sudden they rotate to a fire zone robber coverage and you're throwing into coverage, and you would just never know. There's a lot of very good disguise, and they do a good job of when they're blitzing from depth. When they bring pressure from here, it looks like it's coming from there. It's a lot of those little things that he does. He teaches it really, really well. And, it takes a little time usually for it to take, but he gets his defenses to do it really well. And that's something rare. Yeah. Football is really complicated, Mark.
It is. It's crazy complicated. One last question on Elko, then I want to talk about what Carolina's defense needs to do. Is Jason, a sign of a good teacher, coach, is that they can go anywhere at any talent level and any level of football or whatever, and their teams always play well and play like they're supposed to, regardless of the talent level. Is that fair to say that that's what Elko has done? He's done it at the highest levels, and he's done it at a place like Wake Forest, and now he's appears to be on his way doing it at a place like Duke, where you can't get much different from Notre Dame, Texas A&M to Duke and Wake. I mean, there's no – that's like the ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, two of those things are alike on each side, right? But yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I would put it a little differently. I would say that really good coaching boils down to maximizing whatever your talent presents you. So, the best coaches, it's not true. You had the old idea of, Bear Bryant, what made him special is he could take yours and beat his and then take his and beat yours. That was never true. I mean, Alabama had 150 players on their roster in those years, right? I mean, he came in with more talent than everybody he coached against. But the thing that makes you a great coach, as far as a great coach, not now, in terms of running a great program and being a great coach in the program building sense, you got to toss recruiting in there as a heavy matter, right? If you can't attract the talent to your campus, it doesn't matter how good a teacher you are. You're going to lose against teams that just have that much better talent. But the question is, once they get on campus, how well can you maximize the overall talent level that you actually have? Can you make sure that you identify, okay, what can my guys do? Like, I got this guy over here. He can't run worth a lick, but he really does a good job of, plugging holes up front. So I'm going to try to put him in as few situations as possible where he's one-on-one with a running back, right? Or one-on-one with a tight end. And then, you do what you can for that. So great coaches, what you're going to find that's going to be consistent is you're going to consistently see wherever they go, the players that they have are going to get better in terms of technique. You're going to see fundamentals improve. So just the way that people do what they're supposed to do improves wherever they go. So that's number one. Number two is you see in terms of, coordinators and so on, are they putting guys in positions to succeed rather than fail more often than not? Those two things really, that's it. You do those two things and you're a pretty dang good on-field coach. And, beyond that, it's recruiting.
Absolutely. Greg, let's flip it over. I'm going to let you handle what Carolina's defense does. I got to show Slagle. I mean, Slagle's been here, man. Wait a minute, Slagle, you weren't here at 8 o'clock on last Sunday morning, by the way. And for folks that were, you get double whammies for showing up. I have to give a shout out to those folks. What does progress look like for the defense against Duke, Greg? And what's the plan that Chizik needs to put into place to keep this game? Because if I'm totally honest, this is the Mac 2.0 hiccup. This game right here, these type games. So, Greg, what does the defense need to do to make sure that doesn't happen?
Well, this is a process, right? in the first 4 weeks of the season, we talked about this defense is not good at anything. They needed to be able to hang their hat on one thing. 7 years ago when Chiswick first arrived, they weren't great against the run. They were really good against the pass. And so what Chiswick was able to do against Virginia Tech is completely shut down the Hokies' running game. And so the next step became, okay, that worked. Let's do it against Miami, which is a team that is determined to be able to run the ball effectively. That's what Mario Cristobal wants. North Carolina did that. Yes, they gave up a ton of rushing or passing yards. They did a very good job against the run. So this is another step in that evolution of, okay, you did it against Virginia Tech. We just kind of brushed it off because it was Virginia Tech, right? They're not any good. Miami, however, while not great, they're a solid team. And you looked really good against them in shutting down the run. Can you now do it against Kevin John's offense? Lacking the talent, they're still going to want to be able to run the ball. Their top rusher was not playing, Jalen Coleman. He did not play against Georgia Tech. He's expected to be back this week. That's a key element, right? But now the Duke knows that you're going to do whatever you can to shut down the run. Can you still do it? And I think that's how you kind of tell, is Gene Chiswick able to make the necessary adjustments this week to keep doing what he's been doing, because he knows coverage is an issue for this defense. And the way that they win games is by getting off the field occasionally, by being able to limit what the other team can do running the ball. And so I think how he schemes it up to be able to prevent Duke from being balanced is the key. The only chance Duke has, I think, to win this game is to put up a lot of points. The only way they put up a lot of points is if they're clicking both in the run game and in the passing game. Riley Leonard can run. He's not like an elite runner by any stretch, as we've already talked about, but he can be effective. If things break down, he can pick up a first down. He can scramble for 25 yards. So you have to limit all that. And if you can do that, that's the progress that you're looking for. With the team knowing that you're trying to stop their run game, and you have two game tapes showing that you can do it and how you did it, can you still do that? Can you still be effective in your goal of shutting down the run? And if they can do that, I think that is another step in the right direction. That gives you 3 consecutive games where you've had success, and that's how you tell if this defense is making progress, even though you're playing a team that is nowhere near as talented as your previous opponent.
Yep. That's Greg sits over there on the sidelines and just comes in and executes. Great breakdown.
No need to come to
David.
me on this side of the ball. Greg just answered it all.
Oh, yeah. No, I was going straight to predictions because it's 10:07 on the East. It's been a long day, and folks are ready to do whatever they do after 10 o'clock on Thursday nights. Jason, predictions. Let's go.
Well, I think this is one of those games where talent matters, and North Carolina has a lot more of it than Duke. Even though I really like Leonard at quarterback, I think Elko is a good fit for what they're doing. I don't see you when you watch these two teams line up, it's going to be obvious which team should win the game. So, and as good as Leonard is, I'd still take Drake May. So I think Carolina's going to win this one going away. I think something like 45-24 is probably in that ballpark. I wouldn't be surprised to see it a little bit wider than that, depending on how the defense plays. But actually, I'm going to go with 45-17 in this game as my prediction.
Whew. Greg, what you got?
That's strong. And I don't disagree. This is one of those games where it could either be close or it's going to be a Carolina blowout. I think a lot of things have to work in Duke's favor for this game to be close. And I know a lot of the metrics really like Duke. And what I mean by that is when you look at, say, Brian Fremo's data, he's got Carolina winning by 5. I think the line is like 7-8 points now. Bill Connolly, I think he's got it within like maybe a touchdown. I agree wholeheartedly with Jason, though. The talent discrepancy is just massive here. And as Max said after the Notre Dame game, to consistently compete and beat a team like Notre Dame, they've got to recruit better. Well, the talent gap between Carolina and Duke is massive compared to the talent gap between Carolina and Notre Dame. And I think there's just a lot of things that have to go right for Duke to be able to win. I don't think it's much of a home field advantage. There's probably going to be just as many Carolina fans there as there will be Duke. So that's not really an advantage. I just think that North Carolina has too many weapons. And so I don't have it quite as big as Jason there, but I've got Carolina winning this one 38-24.
Yeah, I'll go 48-28. But like I said just a minute ago before we got into this, it just, man, those games like Georgia Tech and FSU, those games, they get you kind of gun shy.
They kind of rattle around up here, don't they?
Yeah, it's like, wait a minute. You remember that, don't you? I mean, earlier you were talking about Jeff Sims throwing NFL level throws, and I'm like, he didn't have to last year. All he had to do was run wild. Let's get out of here, but I'm going to ask one question. Nick Whitfield asked, if you could add one former North Carolina player on offense, and I'll do or defense, who would you pick? And let's keep it within reason, because, I mean, I'd go Lawrence Taylor.
There you go.
So, and I'd probably go Julius Peppers if we went there. And I'd probably go Robert Quinn if we came back a little bit more. Greg, who would you put? If you could add one player on defense, we'll leave it to defense because I'm ready to get out of here. But it's a good question. Who would you want on this team from North Carolina?
Let's just keep it recent. MJ Stewart, I think would be a great addition to the secondary. And then offensively, I think you got to go with a running back. I mean, Javonte, Gio. I mean, I think there's a number of guys like that would add an element for the reasons we've already talked about tonight.
Speaking of Gio, do we like the chrome helmet? Somebody said, do y'all like the chrome look? I know you're not a big uniform guy, but
I am not whatsoever. I love the helmet though. I just think you got to go with blue pants to make it pop.
I'm with you there.
I think the Stormtrooper look just doesn't work with that helmet.
I'm not big on the Stormtrooper look. So my take on this, on the uniform front, I have some very strong opinions on uniforms. My number one take is that in any alternate uniform you wear, you should emphasize whatever is your strongest aspect of your brand. You want whoever's tuning in, they're flipping through the channels to be able to recognize who's playing right away and be like, oh, that's such and such. So, people point to like, oh, Oregon has, 100 different combinations. Yeah. And every time you see them play, it's like, well, that's obviously Oregon. Nobody else wears highlighters like that, except for maybe Baylor now, who copied them. But, that's basically their thing, right? Carolina has something that is special, and that is Carolina blue. Nobody else has Carolina blue. It's Carolina blue. Right? I mean, it's its own blue. And to me, it's such an awesome color that needs to be something that's there in the uniforms no matter what, to where, if you're going to go with the chrome lids, have the Carolina blue pants. Go with that. And if you got my uniform preference, for example, I think the classic, what they're calling throwbacks, but are, really just like Mac Brown 1, pre-Argyle, Carolina uniforms. Those ones are my favorite because it's just straight Carolina blue with, the great Carolina blue helmet, and just, it looks really good. I do like going to the chrome lids if you're going to do that, but I agree, Greg, if you're going to do it, you got to have some Carolina, white on white. I mean, who are you? What's different about you? Where's the brand?
Yeah. Come on, J-Bone. Pull out the blue pants, pull out the blue breeches before y'all get Durham.
And while we're on it, the greatest travesty, in my opinion, and I don't care about uniforms really, but if the Carolina State game is not blue, red every year, it's a travesty. I know we've done it one time.
It looks so awesome when they do
does.
I've heard they won't do it though because State won't allow all that Carolina blue in Raleigh.
Well, Carolina has,
and then vice versa.
Carolina has tried to make it happen, and they've received pushback. So
I heard, and I don't know if it's accurate, I heard Tennessee's wearing all orange and Bama was going to wear all burgundy. I
See,
can't
I'm all
imagine
for that for rivalry games where you have really
Yeah.
opposing colors. I just think it looks awesome. You know, the
USC,
USC UCLA game when you have all that color, it just looks awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with there. Carolina busting out the blue chrome, whatever they call them, icy hots, whatever. As long as they win, a lot of people
Icy
will not
hots, I
care.
like it.
That gives me some bad memories thinking about icy hot back in the old athletic days. All right, boys, it's been the Game Plan Podcast. It's a little longer than we normally go. Stay tuned for Inside Carolina Live on Saturday, I guess 3 hours before kick. So we're recording 5 to 7 p.m. Yet with Joey Powell. Like I mentioned before, we'll have Dan Orner on that show. Everybody's asking about the inflatable helmet. I'm sure we'll get him to talk about it.
Greatest tackle in Carolina history.
I know, really. And what's funny to me, and I've heard him tell it before, well, I won't spoil it. You got to listen to him tell the story. It is quite hilarious. Greg Barnes, Jason Staples. I've been your host, Tommy Ashley. Johnny T-Shirt sponsored us.
Woo!
We are out. See y'all Saturday.
We went longer because Buck wasn't here with the timer.
Oh, yeah. If anybody has a hourglass that I can have, I will set it right here on my computer and keep it going. It's been fun, boys.